and welcome to the Pots Trowels podcast with me, Martin Fish, Sean and Jill.
Hi.
Hello.
This week I've been talking to 3 members of the Yorkshire Pelargonium Society to find out all about those wonderful plants.
Yeah, and we'll be finding out what their desert island pelargoniums would be if they had to choose just one pelargonium to take away with them. Martin's got some jobs for us as well to keep us busy.
That's a tough ask, that desert island pelargonium, I'm sure. But also we've got the controversial topic of peat-based compost coming up. And let's go and say hello to Roger, Sheila and Brian.
I'm on the stand of the Yorkshire Pelargonium Society and I've got 3 members here with me. We've got Roger, Sheila and Brian. We're going to have a chat to them, but we're going to start with you, Roger. So Roger, you are a member of the society. Just tell us what the Yorkshire Pelargonium Society is all about.
Right, well, we're a bunch of enthusiasts based up in the sort of North Yorkshire area, and but we've got members drawn from all over Yorkshire, and we're not averse for anybody from outside Yorkshire. And if anyone wants to come and join us, they're welcome to. But we get together now and again. We have socials. We have a little bit of a committee that's very informal, but we meet up for socials. We usually have a show every year. This year we've had to cancel it because it's just been such a difficult spring for pelargoniums and difficult winter. But just get together, meet once and twice a year, 2 or 3 times, and just talk pelargonium really.
Yeah, and you've got a big collection as the society, haven't you?
Yeah, between us we have in various greenhouses deposited around the county with quite a large collection, especially a lot of heritage variety. I specialise in heritage varieties, so I have a lot of the old varieties that you would see in the old parks departments years gone by, keep them, and hopefully we're keeping those alive as a gene pool really for future use.
And that's you are ex-parks. In fact, you've just recently celebrated 50 years in horticulture, haven't you?
I have, and I've finally hung up my trowel for the day job anyway, and I'm concentrating on running. I have a small nursery, and we have the Yorkshire Pelargonium collection with about 2,000 varieties in that, so I look after that and other things as well. So it's a busy retirement.
Yeah, well, exactly, which is what you want, isn't it? I'm going to come back and talk a bit more about the varieties in a minute. Sheila, you are a very important person in this society because you're the secretary, aren't you?
I am the secretary, yes. I keep all the paperwork and all the members in order and make sure that they know what's going on and get the dates out to them so that we get a good attendance at events and generally look after the volunteers that volunteer for the society.
And I know some of your members, they need a bit of looking after anyway, don't they?
Absolutely.
On the straight and narrow. So you're obviously secretary of the society, but you are a horticulturist, have been all your life. So how did it all start for you?
It started for me through Askham Bryan, through formal training at Askham Bryan and Leeds City Parks Department. And then I was lucky enough to work with the National Trust at Bodnant, which was a great training there with Mr. Charles Puddle. Mm-hmm. And then I went to Kew Gardens for 7 years. And then Yorkshire dragged me back home again. And through various hats that I had on, I ended up on the East Coast. And that was how I ended up getting interested in pelargoniums. So,
right. And you're still working for...
I work for North Yorkshire Council now as Community Engagement Officer, so looking after volunteers across the county, and it's a very big county.
It is a big county, yes, yeah.
And in my spare time I'm the potting machine for the society, so I do the potting up and the picking over of the plants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is quite a big job because you grow a lot of plants each year.
It is a big job, yeah. You get to one end and you start again, yeah.
And a lot of the plants are held at Roger's in his glass houses there, sort of where you curate them. But do you have some at home as well? Do you have some pelargoniums at home, or when you get home do you want to forget about pelargoniums?
Yeah, my front garden is the Italian Gardens in Scarborough. That's my front garden.
Right.
And so, yeah, I have enough to do
Yeah.
looking after Roger's pelargoniums.
Exactly, yes. It's very good how Roger can get all these people to work for him, isn't it? It must have something, some charm.
It's the charisma and the addiction, actually, I think. We're all addicted, really. And,
I can imagine, because I remember we often chat about pelargoniums. I started as an apprentice on a parks and we grew all the old-fashioned ones, and it is lovely to see them being kept alive by
Heritage.
you as a society.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you're a member as well. Now, you're not a horticulturist, but you are allied to the land.
That's right. I was at farm for all my life.
Yes.
Worked on a farm, same farm for 50 years. Then, but I've always grown plants. The main thing used to be fuchsias, but I gave up with them. The Geranium Society started, and I joined that a few years ago, and it's just went on from there. And I've got two greenhouses, one big greenhouse and a 10-metre polytunnel. I was sort of persuaded a little bit by Roger to, and get a few plants from him. So I have a collection of about 200.
Oh, right, 200 different types of pelargonium.
200, and I like to grow cuttings, and I'm having to carry on with this peat-free, which is not working. So, as Roger says, we're going back to peat a little bit now, and hope with more success.
Yeah, to get them going again. Yeah, because what you can't do is lose the stock plants, can you?
No, we've had a particular problem this last winter where we're starting to lose plants by using peat-free compost. So we've gone back to a peat-based. I don't think they've quite got it right yet, the blends yet, and so we'll have to wait while something a little bit more suitable comes out for pelargoniums.
This comes up once or twice, and we've mentioned it before. Geraniums, pelargoniums, what's the difference? I mean, is that something we can have a chat about?
Well, we can, but I think we explain that a little bit later on, Sean. So,
we go back
we're
to
going to go back. When we go
sorry.
back, you'll find out all about the difference between a geranium and a pelargonium. So you've just got to wait for a few more minutes.
Keep your
folks.
powder dry. Keep your powder dry. Okay.
But the big issue is the peat debate, isn't it? And we could do several podcasts about the peat
Well, perhaps
debate.
we need a bit of an overview. Because there might be people around the world who don't have this going on. So what's going on with peat?
Well,
why are we mentioning
Yes,
it?
it is something that is peat in horticulture. Is the plan is to ban it in England. I was going to say the UK, but it isn't the whole of the UK, because I don't think Scotland are and Ireland aren't. I'm not sure about Wales at this stage, but certainly England are banning peat in horticulture. It's a government thing, and it will be for retail sales. So the general public the ban should come in at the end of this year, end of 2024, and the professional trade, the nurseries, are going to be a few years further on. As yet, it hasn't happened. It's been discussed for years and years and years, and certainly the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society, they have decided that they will ban it at all of their shows and in their gardens by the end of 2025, so next year. So it's caused quite a few problems. I mean, there are lots of companies do peat-free compost. There's a lot of research being done. The RHS have done a great deal. I've been involved in hosting some seminars for them. And lots of the growers that we talk to at the shows are trialling it, and some are doing very well with it, some are struggling with it. And as Roger mentioned on this interview, that they started and they were doing fine, but then they found the plants are actually going backwards and aren't growing as well.
Because some plants seem to not cope with it, don't they?
I think
Whereas
that's
others will grow away and be perfectly happy.
Some are more sensitive.
What properties does it have? What's the big deal with peat? What does it do?
Well, I think it's just it's an inert product. We dig it out of the ground. It's sort of basically rotted moss and vegetation, very old. But it holds nutrients well. It drains. It's a good growing medium. We've used it for the last sort of 60 years, and everybody's got used to it. But I think some of the peat-free ones, which tend to be made from coir or wood pulp or bark or green waste, which is composted garden waste done by the local councils, that can be a bit erratic and it's not consistent. And I think that's the problem. The growers have been using a peat-based compost. They know what they're going to get every year, but a lot of the peat-free ones are inconsistent, and I think that is where the problems have come. And there's a lot of work, and the RHS are working very, very hard on this, and the manufacturers.
But presumably the manufacturers are suddenly having to produce vast quantities of peat-free compost, and they can't. Can they do that so quickly?
Well, I think that is partly the problem,
Yeah.
because they've been making peat-free compost, probably some of them for quite a long time, to be fair, and very established companies, and create good products. But now it's all having to be bulked up on a much bigger scale. It's the problem is getting the raw ingredients, and that's, I think, where the inconsistency is coming in.
What's the problem with peat then? Why are we saying ban it? Is it a bit like fossil fuels? Is it something that takes a long time to develop?
Well, it does, and it's also, we're being told environmentally that when you dig peat out of the ground, you are releasing carbon. It acts as a carbon sink, so it traps the carbon in the ground, and it releases that, and it takes a long time then for that to be sequestered back into the ground. So there are arguments that the carbon footprint on some of the other composts can partly outweigh it, but that's, I don't want to get into the political side of it at all, but that essentially is the reason.
Yeah.
It's
There's going to be no clear-cut answer, is there? But
No.
where do we stand legally at the moment?
Well, at the moment, the government, the ban for the retail sales, for that's what we buy in our garden centres, is supposed to come in and be active by the end of this year, 2024. But as far as I'm aware, it hasn't actually gone through as a bill in Parliament yet.
Well, I guess they've been rather busy in the build-up to the election. But anyway, we're not going to be talking politics
No,
here.
exactly.
No.
I will just say I did do a quick search on the US websites just to see what the state over there, because obviously we don't know how it's thought of over there. And the Geological Survey, the US Geological Survey, I think it's Geographical Geological Survey, says that peat is a renewable, natural, organic material of botanical origin and commercial significance.
Yeah,
Peatlands
yeah,
are
it
situated
is. Yeah.
predominantly
Well,
in shallow wetland areas.
Yeah.
So maybe they have more of it there, and it's
Maybe
you know.
so.
So it's just quantities, isn't it, and the time it takes to be produced. I think that's the.
Well, I suppose I bet if I
major
looked
issue,
in the
isn't it?
US website about oil, they'd also say.
Right, let's move
Again,
swiftly
no
on.
politics here.
So moving swiftly on, I just want to ask you something. When you were chatting to Sheila, she was, bless her, she does so much work for the society, doesn't she? Well, they all do.
They do.
But Sheila was saying that she is in charge of doing all the potting, and then she said that she is also in charge of picking over. So can you just explain what the picking over
Well, this is a very technical term we use in horticulture,
Yeah.
and it's not one I feel I ought to be sharing. But no, picking over, when they, she's obviously potting all the young plants. They do them manually, not by machine. So she's the potting machine, a manual potting machine. Picking over is they go through the plants on a regular basis when they're growing. So they'll be taking off the dead flower heads, there'll be any yellow leaves. So it's just basically working through all the pelargoniums, tidying them up like we do in our greenhouse. When the petals are going over and the flowers have gone, we snap them off. But they're growing by the thousands, so she will literally be starting at one end of the glass house, going down the other, and then carrying it on.
Yeah. And of course, we did a video with the Queen of the Pelargoniums, didn't we, a little while ago, with Helen Bainbridge, who was talking to us about the care of your pelargoniums in pots.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
That includes picking over then, doesn't it?
It did include picking over, so you can find that on the YouTube channel. And we are planning to have a chat with the Yorkshire Pelargoniums. We're at the Great Yorkshire Show shortly, so they're going to create a display. So we're going to have a talk to them. I think we'll film it. We'll film it so you can see it.
Well, it's a magnificent display. They always put on a good display, don't they?
Fabulous. Well, coming up in later in the show, we're going to have some jobs that you can be doing in the garden. But it's not strictly speaking a listener's question, but it's a viewer's question from YouTube. Just remember, if you've got a question, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. But yeah, somebody is watching our YouTube channel and they are starting a new border, but they've never done any gardening in their life. As they've got older, they fancy a few flowers. Can you recommend some all-year flower seeds? Now, I'm assuming this means something that comes back every year rather than flowers that are there all year. But the only thing is, we don't really know where this person is. So, So, Martin, not easiest question in the world. What seeds can we plant anywhere in the world for flowers all year round?
Well, it does make a difference, because you say we don't know where you live. So, but certainly if you're in the UK, with our temperate climate, now is a great time to be sowing perennials, and perennials are the ones that come back every year. So lots of the seed companies, and you'll get them in the garden centres and garden stores, they will have seeds of all sorts of perennials that you can now sow from seed in small pots to produce plants to go out into the garden later in the autumn or next spring, and then they will flower next year. So, we're looking at all sorts of things such as echinaceas. We were talking about the lovely achilleas last week, delphiniums, all those lovely cottage garden perennials.
We haven't got any delphiniums yet. I love delphiniums.
We will do some then. We'll buy some seed. If you sow them now, they will be for next year. And of course, being a perennial, they're then going to come back every year. So, have a look in your local garden centres and see what they've got. Now, obviously, if you're living somewhere very, very hot, I know we've got listeners in California, the range of plants you grow are going to be very different. So just a good point that anybody sending a query into us, just let us know where you live.
Do let us know where you are.
Gives me a bit of thinking time.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, the hemisphere that you're in is helpful to know, depending on the seasons. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. And then there was actually another question that came through. It's quite similar. Somebody in Long Island, which I think we roughly know where it is, but being in the UK, we're making a few guesses. Basically, they're wondering about starting seeds around now, flower and possibly veg that will bloom next spring, possibly foxgloves and cabbages. So that's quite a wide brief there.
Well, it is.
Is that covered by what you just said as well?
Well, it does,
yeah. It's a seed, though, isn't
and
it?
yes, because obviously foxgloves aren't perennial; they're what we call a biennial. So you sow them one season and they flower the next. That's how they grow in the wild. And now is the perfect time to be sowing them. And Long Island, I'm sure you're going to be absolutely fine. It's on the east. Is it the eastern seaboard? Does that make me sound as if I know what I'm talking about? I may be completely wrong. But yes, certainly in the UK, you would be sowing foxgloves now. Very small, tiny seed. We'll get the plants that we can then put into the garden in sort of October time, and then they'll flower for us next year.
Yeah, well, I've just did a quick search while you were chatting. Yeah, Long Island apparently is on the east, although there is an American restaurant in Nottingham called the Long Island, which is currently closed, so I'm not going to be going there. Let's go and find out the difference between pelargoniums and geraniums.
Pelargoniums, and Brian referred to geraniums. Tell us, because people get confused, because people often call a pelargonium a geranium, but just tell us a little bit about the botany side of it.
Well, geraniums is an Eastern European plant, really. It's the hardy geraniums that grows outside, so it's a native to this country. Whereas pelargoniums, southern hemisphere, South Africa in particular, so they came in about 1600s. The first one came into this country, and then they've been hybridised by the Victorians, and we're still hybridising. So, but they're really, they should be. The Latin is Pelargonium hortum for a zonal geranium, or zonale. But it's very confusing for the public, I must admit. And the question we get asked most at the shows is, what's the difference between a pelargonium and a geranium?
Right.
And as soon as we explain, one's hardy, one's not, basically.
All becomes clear. But it's just over the years, pelargoniums have got that common name of geranium, because pelargoniums, the South African, of course, aren't they?
That's right, yeah. But I think it was the Victorians that started calling them geraniums, because they thought that was a better idea, and the public would understand geranium better than pelargonium. So I think that was where it came about. So it's their fault.
And these things stick, don't they? That's
Absolutely,
it's just passed
they do.
down.
Yeah.
But yes,
It's all misleading though. When you go into a garden centre, people are buying these geraniums and they think they'll last all winter, but they're tender, and the people don't realise this. And they get a bit disappointed with the job.
Absolutely, and that's part of what you do, as well as preserving the heritage. It's education.
Yeah, we're trying to educate and inspire people really to grow them.
Yes,
They're a tender plant.
Exactly, and beautiful tender plants as well. So, have you got a couple we could talk about then, Roger? What have we got on the stand here today?
One of the most popular ones is this lovely pink one, Pink capitatum. Or Pink Capricorn, it sort of goes as two names. A lovely little scented pelargonium, sort of rose, light pink flowers, and a light sort of rosy scent to it. So it's a lovely little plant. Fairly easy to grow. If growing it outside, put it outside in summer, basically bulletproof, and just keep dead-ending it all summer, it'll be fine.
So all they need is frost protection in the
They need
winter.
frost protection in the winter, so that at least really they want to be above 5 degrees in winter. But they'll they sort of thrive on they'll thrive on neglect. Will pelargoniums, to be honest. They are a plant that will. But then they also the divas as well. Right. So some of the more I don't want to say interbred ones, but some of the ones that have been heavily bred, do tend to get a little bit difficult.
But some of these are old. I mean, how old are some of these pelargoniums?
The oldest one we've got is Pelargonium trist, which came into this country in 1600, and that's been. The ones that came over originally, the ones that have been bred for the modern pelargoniums now that you see in the garden centres, but you very, very rarely see the selection that we've got.
Yeah.
So they are more the old Parks ones and the old traditional ones.
If you had to choose a favourite from your days when you were a Parks apprentice 50 years ago, is there one that you think, yes, if you could only have one pelargonium, what would it be?
That's a difficult one. There's probably one called Verona, which is a lime green, pink flowered one, which is an old Parks one, or Red Harry Highover, which is now Red Golden Harry Highover is its correct name, and there's also a pink version, but those are the two that sort of stick out. One was used as an edging plant, the other was a bedder, but we grow them in abundance in the Parks departments, and sadly all those have died out because the Parks departments have
Because they were all propagated every year from cuttings.
They were, propagated from cuttings and then grown on and then planted out in the Parks beds. And about September time, the Parks lads would go around from the nursery. We used to go around with baskets and take loads of cuttings, bring them back to the nursery, and that was your job for about a month in the year, potting them on, growing them through the winter, keeping them fairly dry, just ticking over winter, and then we'd take another batch of cuttings in spring and grow them on.
Yeah, exactly, and they are beautiful. Brian, have you got a favourite? If you had to save just one, if your polytunnel was going to blow away, which I hope it doesn't, by the way, and you could grab one pelargonium, what would it be?
Called the leaf one, Hilda's Memory.
Hilda's Memory. I don't know that one. Tell me what Hilda's Memory is like.
It's a coloured leaf one. Pinkish red flower, isn't it? Tricolour. It's makes a nice mound. It just stands out from the crowd. It wins a lot of prizes at the shows.
Right, okay, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Sheila. If you have only got one that you can grow...
to take to my desert island.
To take to your desert island, just off Scarborough.
Okay, I would go for Maple Grey, which is
Grey.
one of the scented varieties. And the leaf is pretty nondescript, really, but when you smell it, when you rub the leaf and smell it, it just knocks your socks off. It's a fantastic, really strong lemon scent. And it's in your house on your windowsill. You don't need any air freshness anywhere because that'll do the job for you.
It is. I've grown Maple Grey myself.
She's beautiful.
And I'm told that if you take the leaves off and you're making a sponge cake and you put them in on top of the greaseproof paper, then your sponge makes, and then cook it, and then when you take the greaseproof, take the leaves off, it flavours your sponge.
Yeah, it's lemon infused.
Yes,
pelargonium cake.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I haven't. Mine never seems to flower. It must flower, but.
It does, yeah. A lot of the scentids are very a bit vague in flowering, to be honest. They're mainly grown through the leaves, so they're often pink or purpley flowers, but they're often very small and insignificant.
But I agree, Maple Grey is such. You've only got to brush by it, and it is the most wonderful lemon scent.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for keeping all these wonderful varieties going. I know it's a labour of love because you all do it voluntarily, but you love it.
If I come back on this world, I'm going to grow something that's not quite as difficult to grow as pelargoniums. I mean, they're great, and my granny used to grow them on a windowsill and everything, but heck, when you grow in the number we grow, they take some managing.
But if you didn't do it, a lot of these would die out, so you've got to keep going.
Once they've gone, they've gone forever.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Spread them around, spread the love, that's the thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, I feel like I know a bit more about the difference between, or the similarities between geraniums and pelargoniums, but is there a one-line clarity that we can bring to this?
Well,
I'm just going to go and get my A to Z of garden plants.
Okay, well, geraniums, the true geranium, the genus geranium is hardy. So we grow them in the borders and they come back every year, very often blues and pinks. The Pelargonium genus are tender. And that is the difference. But they're all members of the Geraniaceae family. They're just different genus within the Geraniaceae family. Does that make it clearer?
Yes.
It got a bit Latin-y for me, but I'm coming. We're getting there. It's all right.
Can I throw another something into the mix then?
no.
So an ivy leaf geranium.
Yes. Well, it's really
like
a
a
Pelargonium.
Pelargonium.
It's really a Pelargonium.
The trouble is they don't label them in the shop, in the garden
I know.
centres, do they? So they label them as geraniums, which doesn't help the issue.
I think Sheila said it was the Victorians got us all mixed up with it because they call them geraniums when they're Pelargoniums.
So an ivy leaf trails, because we've used that in hanging baskets
right,
and containers,
yes.
but essentially,
yeah, but it is a Pelargonium.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
All clear?
Yes.
Oh, you
think
two are
so.
just getting
well,
so good.
you're quite a fan, aren't you? When you and Roger get together, I've just lost you forever, and you'll be giving names of pelargoniums that I've never heard of. But because you obviously have a council background as well. So what was it about councils in the day
And the Pelargoniums.
that they all did pelargoniums?
Well, it all came about really.
I blame the Victorians.
Well, you're dead right. It was the Victorians. A lot of the old varieties that we can still get, and the heritage ones that Roger and the Yorkshire Pelargonium Society are trying to preserve are Victorian ones. You know, some of the ones I've got, you know, a happy thought that I have that lovely variegated one in the greenhouse is a Victorian variety. So they did a lot of breeding and they used them in the public parks around all the towns and the cities.
It is the sort of traditional parks bedding,
and the private
isn't it?
gardens would have had them. The head gardeners would have done them in big containers outside in the garden. So it's just carried on. And we used to propagate them every year from cuttings in September, as Roger said, but it all died out sort of in the 80s when they got seed raised ones because it was cheaper to grow them from seed than taking cuttings and overwinter them through the winter in a greenhouse.
I was going to say, I know you've been around a bit, Martin, but I didn't know you were there in the Victorian.
No, I wasn't there in the Victorian times.
And his tweed jacket and his tie.
Yes, exactly, with my pipe.
Do you have a desert island pelargonium? Would it be the Mabel
yes.
Grey? Did you say Mabel Grey you quite like?
I've got Mabel Grey. We've got one in the glass house here, and it is the most amazing lemon scent. But I do like Frank Headley. I think is the one.
Nice
Frank
chap.
Headley is a pelargonium. It's got a lovely pink flower. It's got a variegated leaf, a very pale variegated leaf, quite a compact plant, but it is so floriferous. It flowers and flowers and flowers. You can have it in flower in spring, and if you keep deadheading, picking it over, then you can have it still in flower in October. So it is just a really good doer, easy to root from cutting. So yeah, Frank Headley.
Remind us about deadheading, because sometimes it's quite hard to know when to take the head off, isn't it? Really, it's
Well, when we deadhead a pelargonium, I was going to say geranium, then, a little slip. But when we deadhead a pelargonium, when obviously there's a long stalk growing from the stem, and then this cluster of flowers on the top. The temptation is to snip that off. In fact, we stayed in some accommodation last year when we were working at a show, and they got a big pot of pelargoniums, and the owner had obviously gone round and deadheaded and just snipped them off, and it left about 20 sticks poking up above the plant, which looked horrible. What you do is slide your finger down the stem to where it joins the stem, give it a little twist, and it breaks away. So you take the flower and the flower stalk away rather than just the flowers.
Okay. So that's a job that we're doing now, really, isn't it?
It's constant.
Constant. Any other jobs for us?
Yes. Would you like some other jobs to do? Well, obviously, deadhead your pelargoniums. Anybody growing irises, the lovely flag irises that have finished flowering now in the garden, the one with the long sword-shaped leaves. This is the perfect time, believe it or not, in the middle of the summer to dig up congested clumps and divide them. And so we do it now simply because the iris has a second rooting time. It's about August time they will produce new roots. So take off the old flower stalk if you haven't done it, dig up your congested clump, separate it, and we want the nicer outer growth, which is the young healthy growth, and then plant it back with that rhizome, that fleshy root, just showing on the surface. Sunny position, they love to be baked in the sun. Water them in, and then they will grow. You can often trim the foliage down just to reduce the foliage length and stop it blowing around, but you wouldn't think digging something up out the garden and replanting it this time of the year is going to work in the middle of the summer. But now is the time to do your irises. I think we've actually covered that in a past video, I do believe. It's also a good time to sow some salads. Keep that continuity of salads going. So all your lovely salad leaves and your lettuces. Little and often is the secret.
I think little is the
often.
secret.
It is little and often. And they like cool temperatures. So if it is quite warm where you are, make sure when you sow the seed you can keep them cool. Maybe put a bit of shading over them, or if you're sowing them in containers, put them on a shady wall, against the shady wall, just to germinate them, because if they get too warm they can go dormant. And you can be doing some seed sowing. We've already mentioned the lovely biennial Sweet William, which is a great cut flower, but if you haven't done, there is still time to do them. In fact, we're doing them now, so sow those for your flowers for next year. And the little violas, the little tiny pansies, again, if you sow them now, keep them cool, they'll grow really quickly and you'll have strong plants to go out in the autumn. Many of them flower in the autumn, so they're great for pots and containers, but then they'll also overwinter and you'll get a wonderful display right the way through next spring. So really, really splash of colour for spring.
Now, I'm not bragging, Sean, but we had a bowl of strawberries last night for our tea. The great big thing, they've done so well, and the birds don't seem to be we haven't netted them.
No,
Normally
we
we'll
haven't.
net them. But the birds haven't found them. I think there's so much foliage, it's kind of hiding the strawberries, and they were just hanging down great big things.
Look, ours have done okay considering they're just a few small plants in pots. We've had quite a few strawberries, just, in dribs and drabs, not a whole bunch. But our neighbour, who has some raised beds, brought round a bowl and said, I'm getting this, like a bowl full, and said, I'm getting this almost every day. So here you go.
Yeah.
So I got some from about 10 feet away from where mine are growing. So I'm kind of I'm taking that as kind of like, it's almost like, and she watches Pots and Trowels, so she's a watcher, a viewer.
Good, that's what we like. Excellent.
Yeah. Remember, if you've got a question for us, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. But I think that's about all we've got time for this week, isn't it?
Probably
I think it is. Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
I know I've had a sneak peek that next week you're going to be catching up or meeting wax wicked plants, and we're going to hear about some carnivorous plants, which is very intriguing.
Yes, a bit scary.
Ooh, I thought we should save that one for Halloween, shouldn't we?
Maybe we could do it again.
Could
yeah.
revisit.
Yeah, we could, yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things we're doing next week.
Yeah.
So join us next week. Until then,
We'll see you then.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.